Hello everyone and welcome back to the Plutonium Show, and happy Independence Day to my US viewers. Hope you had a great relaxing weekend with your loved ones. I've always wondered how fake royals or ex-royals like Meghan Markle reconciles celebrating Independence Day with her constant flouting of her royal title. I don't get it. It just seems to me like a dichotomy that doesn't make sense. But oh well. We'll get to her a little bit later on in the episode. To begin with, I want to start by talking briefly-ish, we'll see how it goes, I'm not scripted with these things, about the verdict, the Diddy verdict. Now, I haven't covered Diddy's trial. I've deliberately stayed away from it. I kind of stay in my own lane. It's not what we do on this channel. But being a lawyer, I thought we could have a discussion of the verdict from a different point of view, from the point of view of the jury. Because what I'm seeing is a lot of outrage over the jury's decision to acquit him of the more serious charges of racketeering and sex trafficking, but to then convict him of the lesser charges, which, look, they're not summary offenses. They're still serious indictable offenses, but the lesser charge of transportation of, prostitution, I believe is what it's called. Let me just double check that. Transportation to engage in prostitution. So it's really interesting for me because I remember 5 years ago when I started this channel, and I was still strictly just a legal channel. I just did legal content. Mainly Johnny Depp, but every now and then I put in other legal content as well. And one of the videos I wanted to make based on a few bad experiences in my young career as a lawyer was to discuss juries and whether they're a good idea, whether they have enough knowledge of the law and a capability of understanding the complicated language of the law, legalese, to arrive at the right decision. Now, I'm not sitting here saying jury members are idiots or lawyers are better than them, but every field has its experts. I'm no brain surgeon. Heck, I'm no psychologist. I talk a lot about narcissism on this channel, but I always give disclaimers. At the end of the day, I'm relying on the experts. I pull up articles and research papers. Nothing's just coming out of my head. And so sometimes I wonder if the jury system is the best way to arrive at justice when you put such heavy cases and heavy decisions heavily based on law, entirely based on law, in the hands of members of society who don't, or who, I should say, again, out of respect, who aren't trained to interpret the law. And I was watching Megyn Kelly cover the verdict with a legal panel on her channel, on her podcast. And one of the very seasoned lawyers on her panel basically said he thinks juries are a big mistake because they just don't understand the law in the way lawyers do or legal experts do. So I'm not the only one who was going through that kind of thought process. I never ended up making that video, but I went through my notes and, I went through the history. We're not going to do that today. It's a very ancient concept, way back to at least classical Greece or ancient Greece. So it's nothing new. Of course, it has evolved throughout the centuries and millennia, but it's not a new concept. So as I said, Diddy was found guilty of the least serious offenses. And some people say the jury was potentially either starstruck or worst case scenario, the jury was rigged. Diddy got to them. Some of them were planted. A lot of conspiracy theories are abound. I tend not to buy into that. I tend to try. I am human. I get biased. I get swayed. But I tend to try to pull myself, to a neutral position and think about it from both angles. Be devil's advocate as well. And the other end of the spectrum, you could say, let me just quickly move this mic so I can brandish my arms about like the Italian that I am and not hit it. But the other end of it is Beyond a reasonable doubt, the standard of proof for a criminal case is an incredibly high bar. You basically have to have no reasonable doubt in your mind, any doubt that can be based on reason. So nothing preposterous, nothing unreasonable, that the person committed the crime that the prosecution is alleging. And so perhaps, rather than jumping to the conspiracy theory angles of the jury was rigged, perhaps it was simply a case of they weren't comfortable or satisfied, rather, that all of the elements of sex trafficking and racketeering were satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm not going to go through the elements. This isn't meant to be a legal video. But personally, for me, I just can't see how anyone could have watched that one video. Now, they've seen other things. They've seen videos of the actual freak-offs, right? But for those of us who were not in the courtroom, I can't think of in what world do you have to be from where that one video of Diddy beating up Cassie in the hotel hallway doesn't satisfy the elements of sex trafficking. Because if you look at sex trafficking, it's basically the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, obtaining, patronizing, or soliciting, so any one of those things, of a person for the purpose of a commercial sex act, in which a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion. Now, the commercial aspect, I didn't follow the trial incredibly closely. I relied on Meghan Kelly's coverage of it, but I'm not sure. I'm not clear on the commercial aspect. Was Cassie commercially benefiting? We know Jane Doe was, in the sense that, he was paying for her rent and all that, and he always used that threat. He always let it loom over her head. Don't forget, you're sitting in that $10,000 a month rental I pay for. If you don't do this, you're going to lose it. So very arguable that that would be a commercial transaction. But the fraud and coercion, we saw, apart from that one video, which would be enough for me as a jury member to go, yep, she was forced. But in Jane Doe's part, we had text messages from her going, I don't want to do this. I feel like I'm not an animal. I'm not a porn star. So it's just insane to me. And it wasn't just the testimony of these women. It was the actual escorts or prostitutes, the men who also testified and said, yeah, he beat her up behind closed doors. And then she came and sat on my lap and she was trembling. She was terrified. So you have third-party testimony that corroborates the testimony of these women. And still the jury were not satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that at least sex trafficking had occurred. So this is where I start going, did they simply not understand the instructions? Because there was some back and forth with questions being sent back to the judge going, hey, we're not clear on this. And the judge went, just read the instructions. So it's a gray area, because the jury, they come from all walks of life. We all like to pretend we're not biased, but we all are. It's human nature. There is no way anyone can convince me that no one in the jury comes in with some sort of bias that they try to set aside. Don't get me wrong, like I do. Everyone does. If we try to be fair in our coverage, or if you're a jury member, you try to set aside your biases. But sometimes they're in the background, kind of like, in a computer, just operating without your knowledge. Now, the good news is Diddy was refused bail. Obviously, the victims such as Cassie and Jane Doe are terrified out of their minds. There was one witness who basically fled last minute. She was meant to testify as well. These people are terrified. And based on their testimony, based on what we know Diddy is capable of, they have every right to be terrified, rather. And thankfully for them, Diddy has been refused bail pending his sentencing, I believe in early October. So he's going to be behind bars for a while yet. And people are saying, now I'm not a criminal lawyer, by the way, so I actually don't have a lot of experience, I don't have any experience other than a personal case I was involved in. I couldn't be professionally involved in it because I was a victim/witness as well, a stalking case. And so what I do know is, some people are wondering, is Diddy gonna walk free? Based on the fact that he's been denied bail, I don't think so. I think the judge does want to impose some type of a prison sentence on him, because otherwise he would have just let him go. But it doesn't make sense to let someone go, even if they weren't at flight risk, even if they gave every single, promise of, not fleeing, and my plane will be locked down, and I will just report to my probation officer every week. Whatever assurances, that's the word that was eluding me, and that's why I kept blabbing. Whatever assurances they give, it doesn't make sense to let them free if they're just going to end up going back to prison once they get sentenced. So this is a good sign that he's not going to be a free man. The last thing I wanted to talk about with regards to this case was the sick, can I say it enough times? I don't think so. Display right outside the courtroom as the verdict was being read of Diddy's supporters behaving like, I can't even call them animals, and don't come at me. This happens all the time. If you accuse a person of color of bad behavior, you automatically get racism allegations. I don't take allegations of racism lightly at all. So this has nothing to do with that. But I can't even call his supporters animals, because animals behave with more dignity and more grace than these creatures, than these things outside the courtroom could ever dream of. Just jumping around, body parts flopping out, covering themselves in baby oil. They're just monsters. They are monsters in human skin suits, just like their god, Sean Diddy Combs. Because regardless if he walks free, whatever happens, we all know now there is incontrovertible proof that that creature, that thing, is not human. There's something about these people that is not human. And speaking of not human, something else that was quite disappointing, to say the least, happened in the legal realm last week. It was a pretty bad week in terms of legal cases, to be honest, especially these high profile ones. I also haven't been covering this case on my channel. Again, it doesn't fit in, it doesn't slot. But that doesn't mean I haven't been following it with great interest. The Brian Cobberger case, the plea deal. I'm not going to get into that, but I really want to know, anyone who's following that case, what do you think of the prosecution caving like that and agreeing to a plea deal when it was an open and shut case, if there ever was one? I mean, that's why he took the plea deal. To spare himself, of course, to spare his life, because it matters so much more. It's so much more valuable than the lives of the 4 innocent young people who were just taken away so cruelly in an instant for no reason, because we don't know the reason now. We're never going to know. We could have known in the trial, but thanks to the prosecution, we're not going to know. But if there ever was an open and shut case, that was it. And if there ever was a defendant who deserved the death penalty, who deserved at least the fear of anticipating it, it was Brian Cobberger. Speaking of sick people who support, I mean, look, Diddy's in another caliber. I'm not about to equate Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds to P. Diddy, but they're iffy in their own way. The billionaire who was funding Justin Baldoni's legal cases, the defamation case that was now thrown out, I'm not sure if he's funding his defense of, against Blake, but that billionaire who is Steve Sorowitz, he's been receiving death threats, not against his own person, but his children who have nothing to do with this case. Get this, per a Forbes magazine article. Around 5:30 a.m. on Monday, April the 28th of this year, Steve Sorowitz awoke to a dwindling fire in a trash can in the driveway of his home in a Chicago suburb. He put it out with 2 water bottles, according to a fire department report. So arson. Someone was trying to burn them alive, potentially. Him and his family in their own home. Later that day, his wife received a text from an unknown sender claiming to have helped set the fire. The person threatened to kidnap the couple's daughter, who was a senior at Northwestern University, writing that she wouldn't, quote, make graduation, and quote, unless they forked over 80 grand. Quote, if you guys are prepared to spend $100 million to ruin the lives of Miss Blake Lively and her family, we are sure you can spare a few for your daughter, the text said. The threats kept coming and became increasingly violent, per an indictment filed with the 19th Judicial Circuit Court of Illinois. Isn't that absolute insanity? You just wonder, are there different branches of human? Are we making a mistake classifying all of us as just the same Homo sapiens? There must be some subcategories, because these creatures, those who were supporting Diddy and covering themselves in baby oil, and those people cannot be made of the same stuff as the rest of us. Those of us who are quote unquote normal, because what the heck does normal even mean, right? But those of us who just don't harm others, those of us who have morals, who have a conscience, we can't be the same species. These aren't humans. These are, as I said earlier, some other type of horrible monstrosity dressed up in a human skin suit. It's crazy to me that we share a planet, we share public transport, we share elevators with people who are basically stripped of an iota of humanity. It's despicable. And over what? Over Blake Lively. You're threatening people, potentially putting their lives in danger over Blake Lively, who quite frankly wouldn't spit on them if they were on fire themselves. All right, on to much lighter topics. Last week, I randomly received, like it's from the heavens, got an idea for a skit. This happens to me once a year without fail since 2023. I just randomly get an idea for a Meghan Markle skit, and I just go, I need to do this. And they're rarely scripted, to be honest. They're very improvised. I will have a rough idea of what I want to do, turn on the camera, and go. And so for this year's skit, I made an as never, as I called it, little parody of this line that I have called as never, because we're never in stock. Get it? Instead of me explaining it, here's a little brief preview. So right here, I have the latest drop from my line as never, because we're never in stock. All you do, now this is the tip. This is a tip, so you just have to pay attention. You just carefully empty out the contents of the chocolate pretzels. Oh, I made a mess. It's okay. My dog will eat that chocolate. Even though dogs aren't supposed to eat chocolate, my dog's special. And there you go. It's just in the Tupperware. You can keep it fresh as possible for years and years until the next time I restock, if ever. You can thank me later. Now, the reason this idea came to me was because I don't cover every single little thing Meghan Markle does. And it was, I suppose, my way of addressing the whole, surprised, shocked Pikachu face. We sold out yet again. What a coincidence. And it was my way of just commenting on that. Sure, it's absolutely, it's because you're so popular. You just can't help it. You have warehouses of stock. You've got wine bottles stacked on top of each other as far as the eye can see, and you sold out yet again for the third time in a row. Well, actually the second time in under an hour, because the last drop with the apricot spread was, I think, a few hours. But this time the wine sold out in, again, 45 minutes, I think. And she made sure to tell tabloids that they're so shocked, they're so surprised, because they really tried to address the stock problems, and they really made sure they had enough stock this time. And yet, because she's so popular, it just, poof, it disappeared. It's funny, I was watching another content creator, and I realized that you could only buy 3 bottles at a time. which is such an obvious tactic to get rid of stock and sell out so quickly. If you can't buy one at a time, if you force your customers to buy 3 at a time minimum, it came in sets of 3s and 6s and 12s or something, multiples of 3, of course you're gonna run out, because the few people who are interested or the critics who want to try it are gonna have to buy more than one. It's such a dirty, dirty tactic, and it's so painfully transparent. And yet her PR team runs off to the tabloids, and it's a classic, the lady doth protest too much. They just kept feeding the tabloids this line of, we sold significant quantities. That word significant kept coming up, like they're really trying to bring the point home. It's not like last time. It's not because we don't have enough. It's a typical clapback. That's what Meghan Markle lives for. The clapback. Even though I thought she wasn't going to play the prove it game anymore. Do you remember how with Jamie 2 name, she was like, I'm done with the prove it game. I think she even brought it up with Emma Greedy. And speaking of Emma Greedy, that's where she said, I don't want to, have this business model of scarcity, a scarcity tactic. I don't want to be known for that. It happens once or twice, you get flattered, but then you have to work to address that and to move beyond that and to have a more reliable stocking lead times, and just so people can have your product year round. Yeah, well, of course, like everything else that comes out of that woman's mouth turned out to be a fairy tale yet again. She sits there and says one thing because then she knew she was going to play the scarcity tactic again. But she said that on the Emma Greedy interview because she wanted to pretend. She was already setting the scene of, yeah, we're going to make sure that doesn't happen again. Oops, it happened again. I guess I'm that popular. It's child's play. It's child's play. And all she deserves, I don't know why I said it like that. All she deserves out of yours truly, honestly, was a parody. This, whatever it is, as ever, whatever, or as never, so many names, it's endless. It shouldn't be called a business. I mean, I know she profits out of it, or does she? That's another question, I suppose. Does she really profit out of it? Does she sell enough to make a profit? This is a hobby, another tactic to get attention, to inflate her own ego, to pretend that she's so important, the Duchess of Sussex. Of course, her products are going to get sold out. It's just a hobby. Either that or it's yet another one of her endless attempts at filling the void that she herself caused when she had a taste of what it was to be at the very pinnacle. I always forget to remove my pedometer. I don't like wearing it on camera because I wear my actual watch, and so I look like a freak. Here we are, almost at the end of the episode. I've taken it off. She had a taste of what it was like to be at the top of the top of the top. The 1% of the 1% of the 1%. Royalty. Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez, yeah, they're billionaires. Yeah, they had a spectacle of a wedding. But they'll never be royalty. It's something you literally cannot buy into. You can either be born into it or, as Meghan did, somehow marry into it. And I think that with her hubris, she really thought she could somehow outdo that. Even though it was clear to all of us that royalty's here, is out of the frame, and celebrities here. And Meghan was out of the frame in the bottom before she met Harry. And somehow she jumped this entire distance virtually overnight. She moved quick with Harry. And then managed to, I guess, end up here, like just in the frame or something. I don't even know if this is going to translate once I edit because I zoom in slightly. It's not the actual camera frame, but you know what I'm trying to say. It was a major fall, all because of hubris. Pride comes before the fall. And I wonder if she's scrambling not just to make money, because we know she has money. Yes, she's running out of it, but we know she has it. Is this a way to somehow make up, fill up that void, that royal void the attention she got at her wedding, the love and admiration of almost the entire world. Even I liked her. That's the thing about people who love to accuse us of jealousy and racism. I was a young girl when Meghan got married who almost looked up to her. I didn't know her from Suits, didn't know her from a bar of soap, to be honest. But, there was that whole media campaign, that PR spin that was going on when she was getting married. I believed in her feminism and her humanitarianism, her philanthropy. I bought all of it because I didn't look into it and I was younger. And I looked up to her. I thought she was a cool role model. She didn't seem to be all decked out in makeup the way she is now. It was all an act. That natural look, laid back. The things that I suppose I am. And so when I saw it in her, I was impressed. Oh, someone else who doesn't paint, hundreds of layers of makeup on, or someone else who's quite chill in their getup. It was all fake. But I guess what I'm trying to say is she'll never experience that again. Ever. She's a joke. And so beyond being a hobby, I really do think she's trying to recapture that glory, that magic. And she probably thinks she can sell this business off for billions, a la Hailey Bieber. But she can dream on in her dreams. All right, on to member questions. Let me just take a quick sip of water. So last week, I skipped a member comment. My goodness, I was all sucked into the whole Sentabali issue that I completely skipped a member comment about my weird series. The name just came to me because Wallace and Edward, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, are so weird. And initially I was going to call it Royal Love Letters, which it kind of still is, but it's officially the Weird series. So part 1 is weird, part 2 is weirder, and part 3 coming this week is weirdest. It's just a 3-parter, and then we'll be done with it's a whole book, basically, of correspondence between Wallace and Edward between 1931 and 1937. So Larissa Christina said, and this is from Weird, part 1, I really think their relationship had a BDSM dynamic. Based on all the letters, books, and other materials we have about these two lovebirds, he certainly seems to take on the role of the slave or boy, as he prefers to refer to himself, while she appeared to be the mommy or the dominatrix. I understand he referred to her as girl in the letters, but I truly believe she was mommy. Spot on. I'm going to keep going, but I agree with everything. It's how I've described it in the videos. It's this weird mother-son dynamic, not boy and girl dynamic. They weren't on an equal footing. She was the boss. And even though we learned from other letters that she did not really love Edward and that her one true love was her actual husband, I believe she became accustomed to the riches and the good life. And who could possibly say no? Given that her other life with her husband was filled with financial struggles, it is understandable why she feels that way. I believe this is what ultimately affected her relationship with her husband. It can be a bit challenging to get back to everyday life after experiencing the wonderful things life has to offer. Absolutely spot on. That is exactly what she basically says. I mean, the thing about Wallace, say what you want about her. If the Nazi accusations are 100% true, which we've gone through all of that with Traitor King, then despicable. But she had a lot more insight and a lot more honesty than Meghan Markle. I truly mean that. I came into my coverage of Wallace a couple of years ago. It's almost 3 years ago now that I started really looking into her and Edward, believing the whole, she's just, the original Meghan Markle. But I have read countless books now, a few of which I've shared here on this platform, 3, I think. One of them being her memoirs. And she has a lot of insight and humility. I know it sounds strange if you don't know anything about her, but she's very quick to be honest with her intentions. Not always. Everyone self-edits at the end of the day. But she was also very quick about, calling out her own shortcomings, the negatives of her personality, something which Meghan would never do. But Wallace has been honest in her letters, even to Edward, we talked about this last week in part 2, Weirder, where she goes, look, I love this lifestyle. I'm poor with my husband, Ernest, and this has been amazing. I love having beautiful, expensive things. It's thrilling to me, she said. But then she said, I'm thinking of future Wallace. And while current Wallace would enjoy this lifestyle I have with you, Edward, future Wallace would be a lot happier as a calm old lady with a steady, dependable love like Ernest. Of course, that's not what ended up happening because Edward, amongst other things, threatened to end his life like not even a child would do that, but it's pretty much what he did. And a lot of people say, who cares? She should have just walked away anyway. I mean, who are we to know, right? I mean, we don't know. I've never been in that position. No one's loved me so much. A king has never loved me so much that he threatened to take his life if I left him. I'd probably be freaked out and go, my goodness, you are crazy. Do what you want. I'm out of here. But Wallace was getting on in age. We have to remember she was already into her 40s when this was happening. Not that 40s is old at all, especially in today's day and age. But there's a stigma, especially 100 years ago, surrounding women of a certain age. Oh, you're single and childless at 40? You're an old hag. Who wants you now? You know, I'm sure those thoughts were playing in her head as wrong as they were. So, yeah, great comment. Thank you, Larissa. The next comment is, I think, from Weirder from last week. I say I think because I took a screenshot without telling myself which video this is from, but based on the comment, it's from no usernames are valid. I love your username. This whole story, I was thinking Meghan and Harry are reenacting this story in a modern day version. It's exactly the same. He's so in love, he can't do anything without her. She wants to change royal rules to accommodate herself. She feigns illness upon negative media coverage. He resigns his job and they run off wanting the royal family to fund their lavish lifestyle. There are a lot of parallels, although I do want to say, as someone who's read a lot of books about Wallace, she really was sick. She ended up having, I believe, both stomach cancer at one point, which she had to get treated, and then ovarian cancer. And so she, before she got stomach cancer, a precursor sometimes is a problem with ulcers. I don't know if she actually had full-on Crohn's disease, but she had stomach ulcers, and that did end up becoming stomach cancer. And so she truly was sick. And the thing about assuming she had Crohn's disease, or just ulcers in general, they do get aggravated when one gets stressed. And unlike Meghan, Wallace really was at the center of a shiz storm back in the day. You know, an abdication is a big deal. At the end of the day, Meghan and Harry created their own drama. Megxit, yeah, the media made it a big deal. It was a disappointing thing to see, even at the time for me, as someone who wasn't at all invested in the royal family. I just went, how could she do that? How could she just give everything up like that? Over what? So with Meghan and Harry, it is really artificial. The drama, the outrage. But Wallace really was on the receiving end of some serious, stressful life events. The press wasn't leaving her alone. Everyone was blaming her for the abdication, which is very interesting because we've talked about this before. There are two theories. Did he actually abdicate for love, or was he basically ousted? Like, was she used as a pawn by the government to get rid of him? They really wanted to get rid of him anyway, and so she was just convenient right there. But all this to say, I don't think she feigned illness. But everything else, pretty much, yeah, they did expect the royal family to fund their lavish lifestyle. She expected to be made a HRH, which she never was. And there was a lot of animosity because of that. Finally, final comment for today. This was from last week's podcast where we talked about Jeff Bezos and him clearing out people from the hotel. And I remembered how the homeless were treated as though they were trash and picked off the street for Meghan and Harry's wedding at Windsor. And I completely forgot about what Christina Scallion. Why did I say Scallion? Christina Scallion said, remember when Meghan cleared out a whole section of seats at Wimbledon? How unfair to people who paid for those seats. Absolutely. 100%. I don't know if people even paid for those seats. I don't know how early on she cleared out the seats and whether they were pre-booked. I'm going to assume that people really have to pre-book these things, well in advance. It's quite an event, Wimbledon, which, you know, it's happening right now. And guess who's not going to be able to ever do that again? Meghan Markle. You know, she can be at home and film endlessly on her Instagram. It's crazy how Southport was so on point about her being, you know, an Instagram loving wife. But that's all she's been relegated to by her own hand. It's quite satisfying. People tell me, oh, I'm so sick of hearing about Meghan. I just want to see her get her comeuppance. I want to see karma. She's been going through her karma for years as far as I'm concerned. And I mean it. I've been saying this since at least 2023, maybe end of 2022. But really 2023, that's when it hit. After that Netflix reality show, she's been going through her comeuppance for a while now. She is a laughingstock. She is the butt of the jokes. She is basically the antithesis of royalty. She and royalty have basically nothing in common. And people don't associate her as such anymore. And so what a fall from the good old days, when she had the power, the clout to be able to do something as despicable as clearing out the Wimbledon stands so she and her two best friends could sit. The optics were just, that's how you know she's this narcissist who is completely out of touch. The optics. Did she not pause to think how it's going to look to the rest of us, especially when there is a royal box? Catherine, who is the patron of Wimbledon, I believe. The royal box is good enough for her, future Queen of England, of the United Kingdom, but not good enough for the likes of Meghan Markle. Why? Because she wanted to wear a stupid hat, which apparently you're not allowed to in the royal box. So again, my way or the highway. I wear a hat, and so I'm going to clear out half the stands because I want to wear a hat. I've decided. I'm the Duchess of Sussex. That's all I can think of. And I believe that's all we have time for today. Thank you all so much for joining me. Keep the comments coming. I really do enjoy this segment. It's what's going to keep this podcast going, because I keep going on hiatuses with this thing. I really enjoy the conversation part. I know it's not a conversation, but it's like a delayed conversation. We're writing each other letters, except I'm responding in a verbal format. So yeah, I hope you guys had a great weekend, and I hope you have a wonderful week ahead of you, and I'll see you in a future video. Take care.